Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, folks, wherever you are, and welcome to this, our, second to last session on the ACP-220. So next week will be our review, which will be our last training session for this ACP. I'll talk more about what's after that towards the end of this. But if folks give me a quick thumbs up if you can hear me in chat. YouTube is giving me some challenges with the stream keys, which sounds highly technical and kind of scares me, honestly. So we are going to dig in just a few moments. We'll do the standard bouncing back and forth between Atlassian Learning and hands-on. This one I'll also treat as a bit of a catch-all, so if you have other questions or areas you want me to dig into, please definitely let me know. And a quick poll for folks. We can get rid of that. All right, I see some folks responding to polls, which means I am live, which is good. So we're going to get started. A quick way of introduction, if you're unfamiliar, my name is Rob. I'm a professional Atlassian instructor and trainer and content creator, which is still crazy for me to think about, but this is my job. I chose to do this because I don't want people to be frustrated using these systems, and I want them to find help doing things like studying. These study sessions started when I wanted to start earning these certifications, and I needed time, and I realized a lot of people could also benefit from them. So that's why we're here. I've been using Atlassian since about 2013, and I kind of accidented my way into it, is kind of the joke that I use. I was kind of forced to use it because this was the system we had. Since then, I've had different roles, but I go for these certifications to help me build and expand my skills, and understanding why we're learning this is important. Sometimes your why will be you want to pad out your resume. Sometimes it's to learn something new. Sometimes it's curiosity. It doesn't matter what it is, but knowing what it is important, especially if you want to go earn the certification. Miss Paula, welcome from Lisbon. Not a corner of the world I've been able to get to yet. Please use the chat to communicate. Please drop in your questions. You'll see me drop in some polls and just ask some questions like, have you been in a prior session with me before? Those kind of things. But that helps us interact, helps me learn a little bit about what you all are up to, what you're curious in. Please interrupt me in the chat. Don't wait for me to stop, and ask for questions. We'll have dedicated FAQ, frequently asked question time at the end, or Q&A, I should say. But please use that as we go, and I'll just keep an eye on it. Also, again, I do this professionally, so please hit the like button. It's the thumbs up at the bottom if you like this, and then hit the subscribe button if you haven't subscribed to the channel. Weekly content around Atlassian things. Frank, welcome, my friend. I'll talk about the Rovo games towards the end of this, just kind of as a fun aside for folks. You can also share this. This is going to be recorded on my YouTube, so you can always come back, so you can double check it later if you want to take the exam later in next year, or if you just want to share this with other folks. Other thing I'll do is shout out my sponsors. Service Rocket, they're right under my head, has a great program called the Crew Member Program. If you're looking for work in the Atlassian ecosystem, they can help you out. They have, they're getting just a running list of folks who have certification and knowledge and skills in Atlassian. And as they have work that comes up, you can get a couple hours here and there. So I do this part-time with them. It's allowed me to transition to this model of, hey, I can be doing full-time content creation. So I'll put a link here. If you take just a minute and check it out, that's a great way to support me. Okay, back to our review. Last week we talked about like site configuration, content administration, those kind of topics. We'll touch on some of these again today. Many of these settings that you see on the screen that we'll talk about are things that we as admins might look at once, or twice, and then kind of forget exist. Or if we inherit a platform, if we come to a new job and it's already been set up, we might look at these a few times to reconfigure, and then we never think about them. These are important though, because each of these, the header and footer, for example, can directly impact the experience of someone consuming content. And so just understanding that most of these settings we can set at the app level, and that's like a default, but space admins can override is also important. In many cases, we can also turn them off entirely for things like, what's a good example? Reminder emails, we can shut it off across the instance. So as the app admin, we can set the default with like a header or footer, but it can be overridden in many cases. And same thing for PDF exports. We can set a custom cover page for our organization or our company, but space admins can change it for their own spaces. There are some things that are site-wide or app-wide, I should say. Themes, colors, the favicon little icon up in the tab. Just a quick reminder of the exam breakdown. We are mostly going to be talking about it's like look and feel and security today. So this will be 19% total of the exam. I always look at this to remind myself, hey, this is where I should focus my study time, but also where I as the admin spend most of my time is probably going to be access and permissions, followed by space setup. Everything else is important, but realistically on a day-to-day basis, Atlassian thinks I'll be doing these the most, and I actually tend to end up doing them the most. All right, time to get hands-on. This is our learning page. I'll drop this in our chat. Quick shout out, if you haven't downloaded this PDF, this is a great study resource. I'll talk more about this next week in our review, but this covers absolutely everything on the exam. So this is what the exam is built around. Justin, my friend, good to see you. I haven't seen both Justins in here in a while, so I'm glad I got half of the Justin squad. This contains all the individual bullet points of what you'll need to learn for the exam. So this is what I base my learning courses on because that's what's going to show up. I'm going to jump in to start prepping for free. Now, interestingly, not absolutely everything, or at least I can't find absolutely everything in this learning path. Most of the stuff is in here. For example, things like the setting up the PDF is briefly mentioned. So we're going to spend more of our time hands-on today, and I'll see what I can find in here. I will also talk about Rovo. That's not explicitly listed, on the exam, and it might not be on the exam. However, it's an important tool for us as admins to know about, both because our team is going to be using it, like we're going to interact with humans that use it, and we're going to see a lot more Rovo. It's just that genie is out of the bottle, however you want to phrase it. This generative AI stuff is now prevalent, and we're going to keep seeing more and more and more in our reality. So I'm in my Confluence Cloud Premium. I'm going to go up to my Confluence administration, and we're going to start with some of the security options we as app admins have access to. I'm going to scroll down. There's a whole security settings section just in this bottom right. And the first one's very, very boring. Security configuration gives us two buttons we can push, essentially. We've got hiding personal data in analytics. Now, what this will do is replace specific individuals' names in our analytics data. So if we don't want to display, Rob is the #1 consumer of content, it can just be an anonymous person. Typically, I leave this unchecked, just because typically in environments I work in, it's okay to know who the specific people are. The other one, though, I tend to turn on is hide external links from search engines. And this helps prevent spamming and other people from posting malicious links. This one I typically leave on. I could see in cases where you have a public help center, you'd want to open this up a bit. Just keep in mind it does allow things like Google to index and crawl around and find things. Everything under advanced we can't touch. We have to contact Atlassian support to update. So if we need to change any of these, and this would be something that maybe we work with our information security team with, etc., we'd have to reach out to Atlassian support to be changed. And I think they do this just because these, if misconfigured, can do very bad things to our site or have unexpected consequences that most of the time most of us aren't going to consider. So just keep in mind many of the security settings are out of our hands. We can see them and know what they are, and so we can get advice on what to happen, but we can't necessarily change them ourselves. Global permissions, we've spoken about this when we talked about creating spaces. This is where we can see and access the app-wide setup for permissions. This is important because it sets the tone for every space. Some of these can be changed by space admins. For example, if anonymous access is turned on, space admins can choose to use it. But if I turn this off at the app level, space admins can't turn it on. So this is something that I, as the app admin, get control over. Justin, I see your question. I don't know offhand. I do know with Bevy, if you signed up through Atlassian, Bevy can send you a calendar invite, and sometimes that invite doesn't update to match changes to the event. For example, these sessions used to be at 6 a.m., half an hour earlier. I moved them a bit later because I don't have to wake up as early anymore, thankfully. But the calendar events may not be updating. So Bevy itself, or wherever you signed up for this, is the best source of truth. And I'll see if I can pull that up in just a moment. But that can cause some challenges, signups. So in here, we've got our user groups. This one is mainly for do you have a personal space, and create a space? So keep in mind, we control these with groups, not individuals, but we as app admins cannot make groups. So this is where you need to know who your org admin is. And let me drop a quick question. Just to see if folks know who their org admin is. Oop. This can be frustrating if the groups are misconfigured. So you probably won't see any questions on this on the exam around groups other than using groups. But to configure personal spaces and create a space, we use groups. Typically, organizations I work with have a personal space turned on for most, if not all people, but very few people have create a space. And this is just to prevent anyone from going in and making another version of support team. Now, the org admin or organization administrator is kind of the super admin. They control licensing, they make groups, they control the background settings. I love how two people said, Jet5459 and Frank said, I am the org admin, and Tushar. Okay, fine. I guess you could say you do know yourself very well. So, that is a philosophical question. I'll stay out of that one. I'm still learning. I'm still getting to know myself. If you don't know, okay, I get it. If you are not the org admin and if you don't know who they are, I highly recommend figuring out at your company who this individual is. They tend to be very knowledgeable about Atlassian, just by needs of their job, but they also have the access to help you do a lot of things that you as the app admin can't do. We can add guests, and this is important because this also comes from our org admin. This link that I clicked takes me into the org admin panel. So if there are guests, I can add them from here, but it requires me to reach out to that org admin, any one of the 11 people who are apparently org admins in this training, to learn about it. Public links are another thing that we control at the app level. And this is another great example of something that if I turn this off, space admins can't turn it on. You'll also notice this is listing spaces. I can control individual spaces. For example, I can shut it off from my end, but allow space admins to turn it back on later. I can shut it off from here just for one space, and then space admins can't turn it on. And I can get information about the links. Let's see if there's any turned on. Oh, good. This guy, Heen Tech, has a couple. So I'm going to click View Public Link Details. And now I can see what specifically it is. It looked like in August, this person turned all these on, but no one's looked at them in the past month. So as the app admin, I can and should be monitoring this just to make sure things are secured. Frank has a kind of a tongue-in-cheek, half-joking comment, I imagine. If you are not the org admin, typically the organization org admin knows a lot about Atlassian, but like everyone, they have their own skill set, their own background. I've been at companies, where the org admin just had the permission and didn't know Atlassian. And that's where my knowledge as the app admin in Confluence, or my knowledge as a space admin, was very helpful. Because first I did was build a relationship with them so they know who I am and trust me a bit. And then I would guide them through the setup. Now, of course, I did it as best I could, But that person had the access, I could bring the knowledge. That's also important. So even if you aren't the org admin, knowing who the org admin is so you can work with them to improve things is very, very important. Similar to public access, we have anonymous access. We can turn this on or off. This is something I'm always paranoid about because we don't have any control. Once it's on, this allows people to come in and access information. So just be careful. If your company, I'm trying to be specific with my terms, if the place that uses Confluence is okay turning it on, just be careful around who's using it and monitor it. It's very easy to accidentally expose something that shouldn't be exposed, to the wider internet. Jira Service Management Access, or JSM. This is important if you use Jira Service Management to collect help desk tickets. This allows folks who have a license in JSM to access Confluence. So imagine all your agents. Typically, in places I have worked, if you have a JSM license, you also have a Confluence license. However, this allows them to view content. And then we've got a list of all of our apps. Now, depending on the app, these permissions may or may not be required, but you can come in here, like, why does chat notifications have the ability to create a space? Not knowing anything else, that seems a bit weird to me. I might turn that off or I might research it. So again, these permissions are things that I need to be aware of to help update. Oh no. Rohit, my friend, thank you for reporting. Sometimes this wire is a bit loose. Also, shout out to Rohit, one of my channel members. Gets early access to videos, and I'll buy him a coffee when I see him. All right, this is a new feature, roles. I might change our sandbox to show this off, but permissions up until now have been a bunch of checkboxes that I'm sure we're all very familiar with. So if I go into this space, no, I have roles turned on. Okay. If I go into this space, this will look different. If I look at users, I can see they have a role instead of all those checkboxes for access. This is new in the past few months. This is not on the exam. This, because they wrote the exam before this was fully pushed out. However, we're still going to cover it because this is where groups are going to start moving into. This is still in beta, so you may or may not have this. And once it's turned on, I don't think you can unturn it on. So once you turn on roles, you have to use them. However, roles change how we handle permissions. Each of the checkboxes you see here used to be one or multiple checkboxes. Oh, everyone's complaining about audio. I'm afraid to turn it up anymore from my end, just in case folks have high audio on their end. Thank you for letting me know, Sean. Each of these checkboxes is some permission. Now, there are now more permissions as well. For example, there is now a edit and create content. So there's a create content permission and an edit permission. Prior to this, there was just create content, and that included edit. So we get a little bit more granularity in here around what we can give, and we can bundle permissions into a role. This is called Role-Based Access Controls, RBAC. That's the abbreviation. This has been the standard way to handle permissions for 20 plus years in most systems, and Confluence is finally catching up to the, say, mid-thousands. What this lets you do is define a role called admin, and that contains all this. And then instead of having to check all those boxes, you can just assign that role admin to a group or individual. You can make your own roles as well. Some of these are out of the box. For example, we've got content editor. Let me go look at this. The content editor can do these things: view content, archive, edit, comment, and edit blogs. So this gives us a lot more control over access and what people can do. But it also makes it a lot easier for my space admins to manage access because they don't have to worry about misclicking a box. They just go in and pick, oh, this group gets viewer, this individual gets admin, this individual gets archiver, etc. So relatively new. You also may not see it yet in your setup. All right, Justin, what I do is I work into my contract. I get paid by the number of tabs I have open. So that's why I have a lot open all the time. All right, so this is a little wizard to help you transition into roles. This is actually new. I haven't seen this before, but this is a series of steps that we can use to get access. What are the current permissions? Who has what? This is a good practice as an admin just to go and audit permission in general. And actually, here's a good question. How frequently do you audit permissions? All right, all you org admins out there, let me know. Let me know how frequently you audit. And this is anonymous. I won't name names. Things you can say in the barn at work, put it on the tab. I like that, Frank. I'm going to steal that one. So this will help you go through the process of switching from whatever we want to call the old permissions to the new ones. And that is a process we should be doing frequently. We should be regularly, maybe quarterly, maybe yearly, reviewing permissions. Most of us so far never audit permissions. Now, depending on our organization or the company we work at and the types of permissions we have, it can be more or less sensitive. Some companies have to do it because there's a regulation or there's some kind of compliance. So keep in mind that the type of work your organization or company does may dictate how frequently you get to do all of this. But Confluence has a space to do this. And Confluence also includes a number of default, we can default in a lot of permissions. And under space permissions, we can manage the roles. So we can make up our own as well. So we get 4 out of the box: admin, manager, collaborator, viewer. And then we can make up to 10 custom ones. So here I've made one called archiver. And the archiver can shockingly view content, archive content, and comment. Frank is saying, check them in intervals and fixed when you touch them. If you see something wrong, fix it. At the very least, if you see something that looks confusing, raise your hand and ask. It is possible there is a legitimate reason for an odd setup, but it's much better to raise your hand around permissions and security. Better to do that and think you're bothering someone than to allow a big problem to get through. And again, the easiest example for me here is stuff like anonymous access or the public links. Just because practically this can be a very big problem if I'm exposing information and I don't mean to. I'm kind of curious how old these are. Oh, June. That's not too old. Okay. Roles Central is our area, just like we saw, a tool to transition to roles. And then space permissions. This tab I actually find useful. I'm working on working with a bunch of clients right now, and this tab is where I can break into a space. So as an admin, we have the ability to gain access to any space in the system. Now, you have to be an app admin, but here's an example. Finance, it says recover admin permission. So this particular space, I cannot access right now. Like if I try and access, I should be getting errors and I shouldn't be able to find it. Or I don't have the space admin permission. So let me see if I can find one. This instance is not the best example because I think I'm an admin everywhere. There we go. But I don't have access to this space. I can see it exists, and I could do the standard request or go home. But as an app admin, if I click recover app admin permissions, this is going to give me space admin of the space. And so after it updates, it might take a moment. I'll then get space admin access, and I can go in and manage access. And then make whatever changes or tweaks I need to. Now, this is logged. So if I do this, it's going to show up in the audit logs, which I'll go find real quick. I always forget where these things live. I going insane? I'm losing my mind. There it is. Some of these settings show up on the left and I forget, and I try to search for them and jump to setting and they don't show up because they're not under these drop downs. Oh, of course it's not going to load. Anyway, here we go. We as app admins have the ability to break into anything we want. However, it's going to be caught in this. So the system is going to log the fact that I gave myself a role. We can also do this for individually restricted pieces of content. So if Frank restricts a page and I can't view it, I can use something called the admin key to break in. And I don't know if I have any in here. There's a specific event that will tell me I gained access to restricted content. And I can't find an easy example. But just keep in mind that all of the changes made show up in this audit log, and the audit log will stay around for up to a year. We can make that interval shorter. So I can make this 6 months instead of 1 year. I can't make it longer, but I can export it. So if my organization needs to record this information over time, I can export it as a zip. We can also do things like feed it into data pipelines if we need to. But this records, you can see the role-based access control. I've changed things. This group was updated. This space was created. So things are happening in here. And it allows me to untangle what maybe happened over time. So that's a fun trick we can do. And again, that's the admin key. We can set the default permissions. This is what happens when a new space is spun up. Again, something I don't touch very frequently. I'll only really go in and change this if I realize, hey, we have to change the overall stance, or if I'm constantly making spaces and having to adjust the individual permissions. It's more of a time saver for me as the admin. And here you can see I've got the same roles, role drop-down setups. And the last thing under permissions is we can control analytics. I personally haven't gone in and disabled the ability for anyone to look at analytics. I don't have a strong use case in Confluence for stopping a group from using them, but I can prevent a group from using the analytics feature in Confluence if I need to. Whoops. Let me keep that on. And that's done right from here. All right, folks, questions so far before we go into like site configuration. Security is a more interesting, exciting part, and that's not saying too much. Again, we're getting towards the tail end of our learning, so we're picking off all the smaller things that maybe we have. And I'll drink some delicious coffee while I'm waiting for you. Quick shout out to my sponsors again, Service Rocket, their crew member program. Check them out down in the link. Either the QR code or, oh wow, that link is hideous. Or this link I'll drop in the chat. But a great place to find work in the Atlassian ecosystem and give you flexibility. So if you have a minute, check out this website. Just poke around, see what you think. All right, where is... Maybe we'll jump into Rovo. Okay. We'll talk a bit about Rovo because, again, this does not necessarily show up on the exam. We'll see some questions around artificial intelligence and AI on the exam. But when the exam was written, Atlassian Intelligence was the tool that was floating around. I'm going to just drop a quick question. FIC. I can't spell this morning. And this is kind of a question I'm expecting an answer to, a specific answer. But curious how much y'all are using AI, artificial intelligence, or Rovo specifically. The easy, cheap, shorthand way of thinking this is ChatGPT or Gemini in Atlassian. Or maybe Gemini is Rovo in Google. It's that same kind of generative AI summarizing assistant that we see in many places. And we're starting to see it more and more and more and more. Right now, it does not show up anywhere for an app admin. So just one thing to consider, as an app admin, there's no artificial intelligence that can help me structure a Confluence space or analyze content or build out roles yet. And I say that because we're starting to see Rovo pop into Jira more and more and help do things like make workflows. So I could expect at some point we will see a Rovo tool that can work with our app admin panel to help us do things. But right now, we don't have that. Where we do see it is on the end user level for content. So going in and summarizing things, finding comments, creating work items, whatever. And that's where I personally find it useful. I won't dig too deep into how it works, more just it exists. There's plenty of other sessions that cover like the mechanics of it, but we'll see our end users interacting with it and using it. Where we as admins might see challenges with it is if folks start complaining Rovo can't find something, or why didn't Rovo find this page? That's where we need to apply our analytics. So coming in here and finding my analytics and maybe going into, say, the search tab. And as a reminder, the search tab lets us figure out how many times are things being searched for, and is there a click-through? So this can help me understand maybe some of these pages need to be improved. Maybe they need a better summary. Maybe they need more keywords on the page. So this is somewhere I as an admin can help, and where I might hear about Rovo getting the wrong answer or providing bad information, but it's because the underlying pages weren't set up properly. So that's somewhere I could see these, Rovo encroaching on being a space admin. We'll see summarizing changes. Hooray. Actually, this is pretty useful because if you go to a page and come back in a few days, there'll be changes. This is a great, easy, quick way to see what the differences are. And just a quick heads up here, if there's no changes, it can't summarize the changes. That's what this is saying, which I get a kick out of. Doing things like summarizing content. Again, a lot of these features are things you could expect an AI tool to be doing. Summarizing comments in a Jira app. So really improving the human's ability to consume information. One thing as admins, we should also remind our team, it's AI. It can make mistakes. Please put on a critical lens when you read this stuff, especially when you're summarizing or generating content with it. Because Rovo can go through and make a page for us based on something. I think Frank is just pointing out the difference between how a writer thinks and a customer thinks. I have not seen that phrasing formulate that out. That said, I don't consider myself a writer. I do write, I punch the keys, but not a writer in the way that maybe my friend Kythra is a technical writer, or other people get in there. Wow, is that all they have in here for that? Okay, they only talk about summarizing content with Rovo. One other thing I'll just point out about Rovo, and Rovo's available in standard, premium, and enterprise. It does have the ability, you can create agents in Rovo, and I'm pulling up an instance that has Rovo, and these agents can take more complex actions and help you do things. So this is something else you may see your team or the people using your Confluence instance struggle with, using agents. Again, we as app admins don't get any special permissions over these. Our org admin, which is apparently everyone on this call, manages them. But we may have people complaining about an agent doing something incorrect. What they're referring to is a Rovo agent that can take some kind of input, generate release notes for me, and then performing some action. And that action could be generating text. That action could be making Jira work items and making a Confluence page. So we just need to be aware that Rovo can also be taking actions in a system. As an admin, also be aware that Rovo's permissions are restricted to whoever's using it. So if I can't see a space and I use Rovo, Rovo can't see the space. If Frank can see the space and uses Rovo, when he uses Rovo, it'll see the space. So permissions are respected. Please keep that in mind because that is a very important topic as we consider and think about the tools we're using. especially as we see more AI kind of appear and show up. Also talking about Rovo, a quick shout out to an event I'm doing in December with my friend Sajid, the Rovo Games, which think of it like a quiz show to help us all learn about Rovo. I'll drop a quick link in here just if folks are curious. But we're trying to make it a fun, interesting way to engage with Rovo and understand more about how it can work and how to use it. So this is a free event. It'll be an online quiz show. Everyone can participate. Jump on in, have some fun with us, and learn about Rovo, which, again, does not show up on our exam, but is going to show up in reality quite a bit. Okay, back to our, what is this called, app panel. Now, there are these tools up in the top, like monitoring, etc., that don't show up under settings, which I always forget they exist because of it. The mission control, analytics, and audit log we've kind of spoken about. Mission control is app-wide, and so this is very useful. Space admins get this, but it's scoped just to the space. So I, as the app admin, can see this. I use these when I review an app to see how can it be improved. What are inactive pages? What features are or are not being used? What are my search terms? Under admin tools, though, we have some other options. We've spoken about automations, but as a reminder, we can make global automations. We can make automations that impact every project, or we can make automations that impact multiple projects. So a space admin can make an automation that impacts a single one. However, we as app admins can make automations that impact multiple. We can also take an automation that currently only impacts a single space and change its scope to run in multiple spaces, or even all spaces. So if we are starting to identify automation rules that are useful in multiple spots, we don't have to go recreate it. We can just change the scope. And that's by opening up the automation in the admin panel and changing scope to whatever we want it to be. Very useful because your team will come up with ideas for things, and you don't want to have to go recreate the wheel and end up with multiple copies of that automation. Exporting permissions data. I personally have never done this, just because I'm afraid of what I'll get in terms of the size, but this will give me a CSV extract of how permissions are set up. Again, thinking back to that question I had, which is a little bit tongue-in-cheek, how frequently do you audit permissions? This can help you do it because you can manipulate it in a spreadsheet. So as an admin, I probably wouldn't do this all that much, but I can pull this all out and analyze it and understand who can do what in my instance, so I can then go tweak it or answer questions or audit it. User access. This is a tool we get, I'll just go find myself, that helps me analyze a single group or individual. This is very, very useful. One of the number one complaints or challenges I see in Confluence is why can't I see that? And what this will let me do is download a report just for this individual, but also let me look into a particular piece of content. So I'll see if I can find one real quick. Okay, I've got this jQuil project thing. Perfect. I want to know, can this person view and edit jQuil project? And what we're seeing at the bottom is just a visual breakdown of, do they have access to Confluence? Yes, they have access. So I have a license. If I didn't have a license, this would be red, and I would then have to go hunt down my admin. Can they get into the space? Yes. Great. Can they view and edit the database? Yes. So it'll show me every level of permission and help me determine where is a break or where, where might there be a problem. I can't think of anyone offhand who's missing access, but this is where I can just type in a name and a piece of content and see why they can't do something to it, whether that's view it or comment or edit it. Here I've got a list of all my spaces. This is more just, honestly, I don't use this one all that much. There's other ways to look at spaces. But from here, I can take some limited actions, copying permissions, changing the owner, archive, and send to trash. Again, another thing that in the same bucket as reviewing permissions, I'm going to go review spaces. And I'll use the last viewed column to figure out this client's portal has never been viewed, or it hasn't been viewed in over a year, I think that means. Can I safely get rid of it? Maybe I can archive it. This one was used 9 months ago. Oh, wow. Yeah, back in February. Maybe I don't need it. Maybe I can archive this particular space. We spoke about announcements. I'm making up words. Announcements. Last round, this has a bar that shows up at the top, useful for, what's the word I'm looking for here? Incidents. Say AWS goes offline. No one can see the announcement bar, so that wouldn't help, but maybe there's a big company event coming up, or maybe another critical system goes offline. This is where you can do that. Keep in mind, when you create these, you can't control who gets them other than everyone who can view Confluence, including guests, or just people with a license. So I can't say only the people in Germany get this announcement. It's going to be everyone who logs in. We also can't delete them. So over time, you'll just end up with a big long list. You can copy them though. So hooray. Personally, I haven't seen groups use these too much, which I think is a bit of a loss because this does show up for all users. So it's a great way to communicate out things, including links. And then imports. You can import content from other places, and I'll drop this link in the chat. This is intended to be more of a, we're migrating into Confluence, or we're getting off of, I'll pick on Notion because they were the top one. Here's Miro and Mural. Wow, that's hard to say. But there are some options to bulk import. It looks like just Notion, Mira, and Mural at this point. So if you're moving from those platforms, or maybe more commonly, if you catch users using Notion and they shouldn't be, or it's like not an official tool at your organization, that the term is shadow IT, maybe that's how you help them out. Looks like about half of us are using Rovo or artificial intelligence all the time, and about a third of us not yet. Interesting. My personal thought, there's no guarantees, but I think we'll see a lot more Rovo in Anaheim in May, and over time see a lot more features built out as groups try to figure out how do we incorporate this tool into our workflows. Best advice from my perspective is make sure you understand your process and what your people need to do before you start cramming in AI. So understand the underlying things that your team has to do to be successful before you start giving them this tool. All right, folks, questions? Any questions, or are y'all, am I keeping y'all up to date quite well? About 25 folks in here. All right, just a second. I'm going to talk a bit about the exam. We will dig more into this as we go. I'm just curious who wants to take the exam. And again, we don't need to take the exam and earn a certification to use Confluence or get use out of this learning. However, if you are, I will encourage folks who have gone through most of these to consider taking it. The journey to earn it is typically where we get a lot of great stuff. Many of you have sat in with me for up to 8 hours so far, 8 weeks in a row, to learn about Confluence administration. And because you've done that, you have learned and grown and expanded your skills. Even if you've only been to a few of these, you are hopefully better, faster, stronger because of it. If you choose to sit down and sit this exam, you'll get even further down that path. And this is why I look at certifications as a useful thing. Frank is asking, is that the topic of his session? I'll talk about that session in just a minute, Frank, but that is a great question. Preparing for the exam will build out your skills, and then when you earn certifications, one, it feels good, but two, you now have something you can point at that says, hey, I know I passed this bar, whatever the bar is. And again, your why you choose to do that is your own, which is completely okay, but I'll encourage folks who have been studying with me to consider taking it. Reach out to me if you have specific questions, if you have financial trouble, etc. I'll see how I can help you all out. I do have options and other ways of learning around it. But these are valuable things that we can then put on our LinkedIn or put on our resume and point at and say, yeah, I am certified in Confluence admin. I know I'm your org admin, but look, I can prove I know all my stuff. So there is value in this. That said, if you're planning on doing this, it does take time. You do need to study. You have to know everything in this PDF, for example. And not memorize, but know it well enough so when you see a question around hiding external links from search engines, you vaguely know what that is and why it's important, or what a blueprint is. So I'll encourage folks who are studying with me to consider looking into this and to consider taking this exam or other exams as we study, because you will get something out of it beyond just the knowledge of the look and feel of Confluence. I'll dig more into the exam next week. I'll show you how to sign up for it, common tips and tricks, how to pass it, those kind of things. But definitely for the folks in the not yet and the maybe sections, I'll encourage you to consider changing that to a yes at some point. Frank is asking about a session I'm doing at 9 a.m. Pacific, so in about 90 minutes. I'm doing a session on Confluence credentials. So not Confluence, Atlassian credentials. So talking about what credentials are, why we should care, how they're created. So I'm not going to dig too much into any one credential. However, we're going to understand where the ACPs come from, who tends to take them, how do you make a certification, those kind of things. So I'll be back in 90 minutes for that. What else did I want to talk about? Our last session is next week, which is crazy. That'll have been 9 1-hour sessions together if you all have been in all of them. And again, that'll be our review. So I'll try and go back and pull out questions. I'll pick out topics that maybe I think we need to dig into more. But please bring your questions around that. And we'll also, again, talk about how to take the exam, what it's like to sit down and make that happen. Please keep studying, though. Please keep getting hands-on. And I will also talk about what's next after these. I've got the ACP-220 Jira Cloud projects set up for early January, early 2026. But I'll have more information on my content calendar and what's coming out, what other study sessions and opportunities I have after that. Do want to thank you all for learning with me. We've covered a lot on Confluence, which is great. And thank you all for joining me. I'm out of content right now, so unless y'all have specific questions, I will let us all go. And the big thing I learned today is pretty much everyone in here happens to be an org admin. So, one final poll for you all. Also, please feel free to reach out. My email's at the bottom. Find me on LinkedIn, Robert Heen, or anywhere else you chat. I do have a Discord community as well, if you're looking for a live chat. Frank, appreciate it, my friend. You're welcome, Justin. And again, a shout out to my friends at Service Rocket who made this session happen. So my sponsors let me do this. They support me in this so I can keep doing this for free for all of you. So best way to support me, hit the like button and then hit this link to Service Rocket and just take a look at what they're offering. But thank you all. So far, all of you think it was a great session, not amazing. I'll have to figure out how I can make it amazing. Oh, I got one amazing. Love it. It's not really ranked. I've just picked a couple of words. Stefan, thank you, my friend. Good. Glad you're here. All right, folks. I'll leave the chat open for just a couple minutes, but thank you again. Have a great Monday, great morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you happen to be. And I hope to see you maybe in 90 minutes, maybe in a week, maybe sooner.